Musicians, if you want to level up your rhythm and meter skills, this video is for you. For those who don't know me, I'm Amy. I am a music theorist. I'm working on my PhD in it, and I'm building this platform to teach music theory as a practice of musical empathy instead of a list of annoying rules. To add some complexity to your music, you're gonna want to know about metric layers, otherwise known as layers of motion or interpretive layers by other theorists. Basically, a metric layer is a chunk of music that fits really easily into a meter, whether or not that's the actual written meter. I have some dots here grouped in different ways, and so you can think of this as like a layer of maybe 4/4 if these were all quarter notes. And then this would be a layer of like 2/4. And then this would be a layer of like 3/4. And you can have all of these happening in a song, and oftentimes composers or whoever wrote the song will write it in 4/4 just because it's easier to keep track of everything happening at the correct time. But the cool thing is that to level up your music and to make it more tense or thick is to use what's called metric dissonance. And there are two kinds of metric dissonance. There's grouping dissonance and displacement dissonance. In this video, we're talking about grouping dissonance. Grouping dissonance happens when different layers are grouped into different meters like this, but they don't line up with each other. So 4/4 and 2/4 don't technically create grouping dissonance with each other because they just line up really nicely with each other. One is a multiple of the other, a very simple multiple of the other. Whereas 3/4 and like 2/4 or 3/4 and 4/4, they're pretty dissonant because it takes you 4 groups of 3 to line back up to the groups of 4. So that's what we would call a grouping dissonance in music. These are very simple examples because I am just introducing the concept to you today. So this top one is an example of where there is no grouping dissonance. We've got clearly groups of 4. So here's what that sounds like. There's very clear 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can hear accents very regularly without there being any like weird stuff going on. But one thing we can do to add complexity to this is introduce a group of 3. And to create a group of 3, instead of just like holding notes out, which you can do, you can also create patterns and break them. And then every time you break the pattern basically is where a grouping boundary will be. So what I did is created these groups by stepping up and then jumping down, stepping up and jumping down. And you can see I used pedal markings here to show where the groups of 3 were. Here is a grouping dissonance of 3 against 4 here. That it's not as easy to hear the like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can kind of hear like an accent every time there's a new group of 3, but you can also hear an accent every time one of these notes changes too. And then we can add another layer of complexity to that by going down here and creating groups of 3 using half notes. So I've got groups of 3 that span 6 beats total. I did the same thing where I just create a pattern and then repeat the pattern with a break in between each of them. I've got the same whole notes holding out here and then the same quarter note groups of 3 here. It's really hard to find where the downbeat or like the strongest beats are in the measure, right? And that's kind of intentional. This would be really awesome if you're trying to create this sort of like tense or maybe wandering sound to your music. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is that you can do this to any size rhythm. So down here on the bottom I have groups of 3 that are 1/8 notes. You can go smaller than this if you want, but I did the same thing where I created a pattern. These are arpeggios this time. So the bass note is the beginning of every group of 3, and then I just let everything be groups of 4 as well. So you can see all those groups based on where the pedals are. So here's what that sounds like. So that's grouping dissonance in a nutshell. Make sure you're following so you can learn more about metric dissonance and other fun theories of music.